The number one killer of gains is injuries. That's why you should never be tempted by programs that promise quick results if the disclaimer mentions higher risks. Even if you survived the program, many others did not and are paying the price for it. It could be that you just got lucky, or perhaps there's some overuse that developed which won't hurt you now, but might in the second training cycle, or when transitioning to something completely different. Consider the small off squat program. The attraction of adding 100 pounds to your squat in 13 weeks might sound promising, but how many actually complete the full system? Just a junior version of the first 6 weeks are challenging enough, and imagine with the peaking phase. By the end, your knees, lower back, shoulders, wrists, and elbows could all be strained due to the high volume, high intensity, and high frequency of squatting. After all, this is equivalent to a year's worth of squatting condensed, which explains the hyper-accelerated progress, but also the significant risk versus reward. The toll is so severe that months after the program, joint pain can still be present. Not to mention resorting to popping Advils like candy, or topically applying NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, before every workout with tight sleeves to mask the pain. Eventually, regression is the only outcome, which is the worst part of all this. How do you retain the gains from a high-risk program? Newsflash? You don't. Only the technique will remain, but your strength will inevitably decline. Also, any increase in size that you think was achieved will be reduced in the measurements due to less tissue swelling. Because the truth is, you can't speed up muscle gain since mechanical tension is the primary driver and there's an upper threshold of stimulation versus recovery. And doing more high specificity work might benefit strength athletes, but not hypertrophy enthusiasts. And even there, if the program is not sustainable, high-risk training is still not worth it because otherwise you're not peaked anymore. Whereas taking the slow, general route is not optimal in the fastest sense of progression, but is far superior for maintaining yearly performance and most importantly, reducing injuries through all known mechanisms. Overuse, easy load management, and exercise form that naturally lends itself into being safer. So let's address this emerging idea that no exercise is inherently dangerous. See, it's been stated that all exercises are technically safe if they can be minimally loaded without experiencing any pain. The belief is that extreme ranges of motion or specific joint angles can all be overloaded if the tissue's capacity is not exceeded. This means that appropriate load selection is more important than the way you perform any exercise. So commonly accepted bad positions, such as being fully internally rotated, flaring the elbows out completely when pressing, deep knee bending, spinal flexion and twisting, using certain fixed implements, deficits, now retracting your scapula, etc., are not dangerous if you're strong enough and use proper technique. And you know what? That's a fact. I don't disagree. However, there are some caveats in stating these things so casually without any context. The assumption is that all these so-called risks are overblown, or at least equalized to more commonly accepted prescriptions like being tucked, tight, staying in your active range, etc. And that's where the concept starts to fall apart for the average lifter, especially when analyzed in the long term. Because in the real world, we now have a generation of older strength athletes and bodybuilders who will tell you straight up that some exercises are riskier, and the reasons are always logically justifiable. So even though no exercise is dangerous on an absolute scale, the relative danger compared to others is something that cannot be ignored. Because let me tell you, even strong, smart lifters get hurt while using exercises that are known to be safer. So imagine doubling down on variations that historically had a higher injury risk. I argue that the rate of speeding up injuries and overuse increases, but the final injury would be the same. So if all you did was guillotine presses, heavy and light, you can't tell me that your shoulders are going to feel just as good as someone who only does reverse grip bench. One is maximum flare with internal rotation, the other is maximum tuck with external rotation. And anecdotally, it doesn't take a genius to foresee how this story plays out. With the guillotine emphasis, you have to be very careful with flawless form, controlling the tempo rigorously, micro-adjusting the load and rotating it out at just the right time before overuse kicks in. Whereas a conventional arm path has much more room for error and is inherently safer. See, we can say there are no dangerous exercises by themselves, sure, but in contrast, we can also say there are absolutely safe exercises in isolation. Coincidentally, these are usually the opposite of the so-called dangerous ones, meaning, what are you going to favor in the long term? Gun to your head. Are you going to gamble with the higher probability of getting hurt just because you can right now? Are you going to be that macho, indestructible mindset lifter who pounds the iron without a condom? When in reality, your body's screaming in pain, but some inexperienced trainer told you to fuck how you feel? Realistically, to what extent can you get away with that, and for how long? Because I'll tell you personally, certain movement patterns that I take advantage of often lead to noticeable pain. But I'm smart enough to cut back on the spot, actually listen to my body, and switch to a variation that's generally more favorable. You know, as a 405 bencher, there's a reason why I choose close to medium grips, or even reverse grip with elbow tucking on presses. Even if I'm weaker and bleeding strength on an absolute scale, it doesn't matter. There's a reason why I favor controlled pause reps instead of cheat reps like I used to. There's a reason why I mix in several ranges of motion and resistance profiles instead of doing extended, lengthened only, which can compromise stimulus to fatigue. There's a reason why I blend exercise on a given day to reduce weekly muscular overlap and love 72 to 96 hours of recovery between strenuous sessions. There's a reason why I love high rep band work and accommodating resistance for strengthening the connective tissue. There's a reason why I wear wrist wraps, sleeves, and a belt, even if marginally helpful. There's a reason why I lift heavy year-round to maximize tendon strength. There's a reason why I think about alignment with the joints instead of forcing restrictive positions that just toughen it out because the body will adapt. No, we can be smart in that in the modern age. And my track record demonstrates that some exercise and training protocols are probably safer investment on your body. And even the exercises that are legitimately safer, know that you still have to rotate them, which the minimalists just don't seem to get. It's why there's no such thing as a best exercise, and why you must be strong everywhere to reduce repetitive joint stresses while accounting for possible misgrooving on your major exercises. Weak links will always hold you back, no matter if it's for bodybuilding or strength training. It's like installing a 3x3 power rack with 2x2 bolts. Eventually it's going to fall apart and be less stable. So even though one exercise is inherently not dangerous, it cannot account for all the intricacies contributing to injuries. Extra consideration must be paid attention to movement variability. Being a contrarian who only does the overly brutal stuff is flat out ego-driven, especially when you're recommending it to a global audience of lifters who have trouble with the basics. This shouldn't be hard to grasp if you go to any commercial gym and look around or analyze what the top natties are doing decades from now. You'll start to see common patterns. Remember, even if you're young, you should train like you're old. Why not get an early head start? And when you consider individual leverages, managing fatigue, recovery, and load becomes even more complicated. So what feels safest for me might not even apply to you, even if it is the gold standard. Only experience and self-trust will unveil the truth. So my experience as someone with a long torso, short arms, and short legs, aka a bencher and squatters build, I've noticed 6 things that my body hates. Let me know what yours are, by the way. So 1, all wide grip presses. 2, elbow flare during presses. 3, any internally rotated, elevated push or pull. So it's the same thing here. So maybe we can say that's 1 point. 4, exceeding spinal active range during hip hinges. 5, fixed implements for arm isolation work that don't match my natural carrying angle. 6, bouncing out of a stretch reflex, particularly for dips and squats. Then finally, number 7, using machines that aren't biomechanically sound, which is unfortunately the vast majority. Prime Fitness is the main exception, with some hammer strength machines, but most are complete fucking garbage, which end up causing serious shoulder pain in my upper body or knee and lower back pain in the lower body. You know that's fucked up when axial loading my spine with barbell squats for reps, say between 4 and 5 plates, and do good mornings with over 300 feels way better on the joints than a conventional machine. And how weighted dips with 5 plates for reps feels infinitely superior on my otherwise prone to pain shoulders than a stable converging chest press machine that typically has a poor arm path. So for that reason alone, I choose a quality power rack with free weights or cables, provided it's not a pain in the ass setup, all day, any day. Even when focusing on hypertrophy as the main goal, I don't care one bit if it's not optimal. If after 3 months I begin to feel discomfort on a new, less risky exercise, whereas doing the basics for almost a decade does not cause problems, that's relevant. Even more so as an elite lifter. Longevity holds far more weight, and a lot of the trendy stuff you see nowadays doesn't have it. This applies to programming methods and exercise selection. So I prioritize longevity above all else, and I've been screaming this from the rooftops since 2017. Since then, look how many are out of the game, while I've continued to acquire lifetime PRs without any injuries, not one. Injury prevention over gains, period. And it just so happens that the basics done right fit those criteria perfectly, as with most aspects of serious training. Now, regarding what's generally risky, but actually proves safe for me, is the following. And keep in mind, this may not apply to you. Super range of motion pressing, no matter how deep the stretch, like camber bar bench, dips, deficit push-ups, etc., are universally tolerable. Super wide grip pull-ups and dead hangs, even though I initially believed they wouldn't suit me, turned out to be life-changing from a rejuvenation and general strength standpoint. Deep knees over toes action or any quad isolation bulletproofs the knees rather than destroying them. Not retracting the scapula or just doing depression during exercises like dips, overhead press, or self-limiting bench variations like Larson press feels just as good as being maximally tight. Then, a little controversial one, heavy singles are safer than lower reps of 2 to 5 when taken to failure, since there's less fatigue, which can lead to form breakdown. And finally, if you do not train with safety pins, then that's more dangerous than any exercise you can possibly do. It's literally a death sentence, as we recently tragically witnessed with Justin Vicky. May he rest in peace. And if you somehow manage to survive, the event could still be crippling, like with what we see in powerlifting, where human spotters consistently fail year after year. Do you remember Eddie Cohn and Brandon Lilly? There's countless others, and sadly, all these career-ending injuries could have been 100% avoided. So it's a huge risk to lift heavy or train to true muscular failure without appropriate safety measures in place. It's worse than ego lifting, worse than all the lifting fail compilations combined. Please, I beg you, if you tag me lifting heavy ass weight, I'm so proud of you, but please, have safety measures in place. Whether it be straps or pins, spotter arms, I don't care, have something in case the worst possible scenario happens, because you never know. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Oh, and one more bonus point, being natural is by far your best insurance card for being safe. It's to the point that when I bench 405, my Medicare card was expired. I had 0% fear of getting hurt because of my tendon strength. And over the last 10 years, I've literally maxed out hundreds of times without ever incurring a single injury or negative strain. Scroll down my Instagram page or watch my older workout videos. It's all documented, okay? I'm not made out of adamantine. In fact, when I was younger, I was in pain all the time. So it's not genetics, it's called respecting your body, and you can do the exact same. So take that as you will. Maybe, just maybe, there's something to higher exercise selection, focusing on weak points, and using classic form that's been proven to be safe and effective among the best. Just saying. That, or go follow some minimalist coper who's going to fearmonger you into oblivion because he's only projecting his frailty onto you. So yeah, forget about comebacks. There shouldn't be any to begin with if you train correctly from the start. And if you plan on training for the rest of your life, you better believe that staying injury-free is more important than how fast you get strong. Don't learn that the hard way. So with that said, I'm done ranting. If you want more information, check out my injury prevention playlist since you'll find specific topics. And if there are any exercises or muscles that you'd like me to address, share them in the comment section and we will solve the pain together as a community.